Kane had traveled 3 months across hostile space to reach the Zythari homeworld. The crystalline towers of the royal palace pierced violet skies, beautiful and cold. Queen Vel'sara waited in the grand hall, her Seek's eyes tracking his every movement. The air felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Guards lined the walls with weapons drawn, not holstered. This was supposed to be a peace negotiation. Kane kept his expression neutral and bowed. The queen gestured to a seat across from her at a table laden with alien delicacies. She smiled, but her mandibles clicked nervously. The servants brought out the ceremonial dish, a deep purple stew that shimmered with an oily sheen. Vel'sara watched him with an intensity that made his instincts scream. She lifted her own bowl in salute. Kane mirrored the gesture and took a spoonful. It tasted like burnt copper and rotting flowers. Awful. He swallowed anyway and smiled. The queen's eyes widened fractionally. She set down her bowl untouched. Kane took another bite, then another. The flavor didn't improve, but he'd eaten worse during survival training in the Australian outback. At least this was cooked. Minutes passed. Kane discussed trade routes and mineral rights between bites. Vel'sara barely responded. Her claws tapped the table in an irregular rhythm. Sweat beaded on her chitinous forehead. Kane finished the bowl and gestured to a servant. Could he have more? The queen's translator device stuttered. Her mandibles opened and closed wordlessly. A servant refilled his bowl with shaking hands. Kane thanked them and continued eating. Something was very wrong here, but walking out now would destroy months of diplomatic groundwork. He kept his voice steady and his hands visible. Vel'sara stood abruptly. Her chair clattered backward. She barked orders in her native tongue. Doors burst open and physicians rushed in, their scanner devices already active. They swarmed around Kane's chair. He set down his spoon carefully. Was this some kind of medical inspection? Cultural ritual he'd missed in the briefings? The doctors chittered frantically at each other, waving instruments over his head and chest. One pressed a cold metal disc against his neck. Another drew what looked like a blood sample from his arm without asking. Kane raised an eyebrow but didn't resist. The queen paced behind them, all 6 eyes locked on him. More doctors arrived. Then more. The banquet hall filled with medical staff until Kane counted at least 30. They huddled in groups, examining readouts with increasing agitation. One physician approached the queen and spoke rapidly. Vel'sara's skin shifted from deep purple to pale gray. She swayed. Guards caught her before she fell. Kane stood. "Are you all right, Your Majesty?" Should he call for his ship's medic? The queen stared at him like he'd grown a second head. She whispered something. Her translator picked it up. "How are you still alive?" The pieces clicked into place. Kane looked down at his empty bowl. The oily sheen. Her untouched portion. The timing. "You poisoned me." It wasn't a question. Vel'sara's legs buckled. She collapsed into her throne, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she looked small, fragile. "Yes," she said. "Neurax toxin. Enough to kill a Grithian war beast. You should be dead. Should have been dead 12 minutes ago." Kane processed that. He'd been eating poison for nearly 20 minutes. He felt fine. Slightly nauseous maybe, but he'd attributed that to the flavor. He sat back down and met her eyes calmly. "Why?" Vel'sara's voice cracked. "Because my people are dying. A plague tears through our empire. We are weak, desperate. And humanity arrives now. Of all times, speaking of peace and trade." She laughed bitterly. "I thought you came to conquer, to take what remains while we're helpless. So I tried to kill you first, send a message. But you just kept eating, kept smiling, like it was nothing." Her physicians parted as their lead scientist approached with a datapad. He showed her something. Her 6 eyes went wide. "Impossible," she breathed. The scientist turned the datapad toward Kane. Medical scans showed his internal organs in detail. His liver glowed bright yellow on the display. "Your body is processing the toxin," the scientist said in halting English, breaking it down, neutralizing it. "We've never seen biological chemistry like this. What do you—" Kane almost laughed. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm human. We come from Earth, a Class 12 death world. He saw their confused expressions and continued, "Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Venomous creatures, toxic plants, bacterial plagues, viral pandemics. Our bodies learned to adapt, or we died out. This poison, my liver thinks it's alcohol. Unpleasant, but manageable." Silence filled the hall. Vel'sara stood slowly. She approached Kane and knelt before him. He tensed, unsure what was happening. "Forgive me," she said. "I tried to murder an ambassador, an innocent. You would be justified in declaring war. Your fleet could annihilate what's left of my empire." Kane shook his head. He helped her to her feet. "I don't want war, Your Majesty. I came here to help." She looked at him with something between hope and disbelief. "How could you possibly help us now?" Kane pulled out his communicator. He sent a priority message to his ship. Within minutes, his chief medical officer responded. Kane explained the situation, the plague, the Zythari biology, the desperation that had led to tonight. He looked at Vel'sara. "Our doctors would like to examine your people. Our immune systems have conquered diseases you can't imagine. Maybe our antibodies, our treatments, our medical database can help. It's worth trying." The Queen's voice trembled. "After what I did, why would you help us?" Kane smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We survive, and we help others survive too." 2 days later, human medical teams filled the Zythari research facilities. They worked alongside alien physicians, sharing data freely. Kane's blood alone contained antibodies to 17 different pathogens, 3 of which showed promise against the plague. Within a week, they'd synthesized a treatment. Within 2 weeks, infection rates dropped 40%. Vel'sara stood beside Kane as they watched the first recovered patients leave quarantine. She'd insisted on making a public statement. She told her entire empire what she'd done. The assassination attempt. The poison. Kane's impossible survival. And his choice to help anyway. The Queen looked at him. "Humanity could have conquered us, could have enslaved us in our weakness. Instead, you offered your hand, your knowledge, your very blood to save us." She raised her voice so the gathered crowd could hear. "The Zythari Empire pledges itself to the Human Alliance, not out of fear, not out of debt, but because we have seen your true nature. You are not conquerors, you are survivors. And you teach others to survive." Kane thought about Earth, about humanity's long climb from poisoned oceans and toxic atmospheres. Every generation stronger than the last. Every challenge survived, making them harder to kill. The galaxy feared humans because they were tough, relentless, unkillable. But that was only half the story. Humanity's real strength wasn't that they could survive anything. It was that once they did, they turned around and pulled everyone else through too, even those who'd tried to kill them. The crowd erupted in cheers. Vel'sara clasped Kane's hand. He squeezed back. One more species saved, one more ally gained, not through weapons or threats, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to let others suffer alone. That was humanity. That was what made them special across a galaxy of 1,000 civilizations. They'd survived the unsurvivable, and now they were making sure no one else had to face extinction alone. The poison had worn off completely. He felt fine, normal, ready for whatever came next. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they endured, they survived. And then they made sure everyone else could too.